Let's talk about my matrix approach and how we put all of this stuff into our current lessons in an organized and simple manner. So as you can see, I've got a standard spreadsheet here. Across the top, I have the topics in my course. This one happens to be taken from Working Capital Management, Business 4108, Corporate Finance. This is one lesson in that course. I've got a couple examples here, explain the difference and calculate operating cycle and cash cycle, compare and contrast different forms of short-term financing, prepare a cash budget, etc. That's across the headers at the top. Down the first row we have, or down the first column, we have the skills: presentation, discussion, writing to executives, writing to entry level, critical thinking. CT is abbreviation for reframing. So when we start thinking about how to incorporate the skills into the lessons, take your lessons and take all of the Bloom's bullet points that you already have, and then just do a matrix approach to adding the skills one by one where they fit and then where they make sense. So for example, in this case, I'm explaining the difference between and calculate the operating cycle and the cash cycle. Well, what we're going to do is talk about operating cycle versus cash cycle to employees, and we're going to send them an email. So it's very short, very simple. So instead of giving them a problem to just either explain it and write it down, what we do is explain it, but explain it to an audience. And then they get practice writing to different audiences, and they get practice writing to professionals. In compare and contrast different forms of short-term financing, we're going to do debate. That's a different form of speaking. You're going to have two people on the stage, you're debating about certain things, or even different groups, and so we can have a debate. That's a different form of public speaking. That's one that you definitely want to do in your career, you're going to do in your career, and so we need to practice. Preparing a cash budget. Well, I've got a couple of things here. First, we're going to do a memo. We're going to give them a problem where they're short on cash, and they have to tell their boss, oh, we're short on cash, this is a problem. And we're also going to worry about choices. So we want to reframe the cash budget into different choices. So a cash budget is not saying that we're really, really in trouble here, or we might not be, but it's just about making choices. Budgeting is about making choices. If we can reframe budget into making choices and then explain it to people, the memo would be better taken. So these are just things that I came up with. Obviously, you're going to do your own. The model works for everyone. So you take the top row and put in your lesson goals, each goal for each lesson, and then along the side on the first column, you start adding the skills that you want to add in. And so you can see how you can put a lot of different skills in by just reframing a little bit, just changing it slightly. You can get a different example of what's going on. You can also add additional things such as behavioral. What behaviors do what behaviors do employers desire? Are we addressing them? Can we easily address them? Yes, with this matrix approach. So take that first column and say, what do I want to have my students be able to do for their employers, or what they need for career success? It could be networking. It could be all kinds of different things. When you think about those advantages in that first column, that's up to you. You can do all kinds of different things with this. For example, let's talk about humility. Humility. Laszlo Bock, the Vice President of Human Resources from Google, I think he's retired now, he says traditional leadership is, were you the president of the chess club? Were you the vice president of sales? How quickly did you get there? And then he goes on to say, we don't care. What we care about is when you're faced with a problem and you're the member of a team, do you, at the appropriate time, step up and lead? And he goes on to say, and just as critically, do you know when to step back and stop leading and let someone else take the lead? Well, that second part is really, really challenging for some people. And of course, this would be fantastic as a career skill. And he goes on to say, because what's critical to be an effective leader in this environment is that you have to be able to relinquish power. Practicing relinquishing power. Oh my goodness, what a wonderful skill to have in your career, and understand it in people. And of course, that is not very common. It is very rare. And the Google Vice President of Human Resources, the person who's in charge of how they hire people, that's what they're looking for. And so that's incredibly important. Even when we talk about power, look at the problem that we had with Jack. What did they do? They put the student in a position of power because he's actually reviewing Jack's work. Instead of just answering the problem, he's actually correcting Jack. And he didn't actually criticize him. Think about what they really asked. They asked him to tell him what he did right and then help him improve what he didn't do right or what he did wrong. So in your students, you can have them teach a problem, lead a discussion, lead a team, case study, etc. You have to cause them to think on their own and be responsible for other people. Reverse the roles and see a different perspective. If you follow the Stanford prison experiments, or if you've seen the video on them, it's fantastic. And they just took students and they stuck them into a prison situation, and immediately, because they were in a prison situation, the guards became aggressive and the prisoners became defensive. And just in play acting, knowing full well they were going back to their classes and everything would have been fine, they still went through many mental challenges because of the role they see in society. So when you start thinking about how important that is in career success, you can put this into your classes extremely easily if you use a matrix approach and find the right place to put it. You can also put in empathy. Now think about empathy as a skill. You know, the difference between being in someone else's shoes and your own shoes is dramatic. So I have an example in my own life of a friend of mine who started his own business. And of course, as an employee, he was always saying, oh, if I ever start my own business, I'll take care of my employees. I'll be a really good manager. I'll really be a good owner, etc. The minute he took over the company, he fired half the staff and cut their pay and became the tyrant that he always hated as an employee. And I asked him, I go, what happened? You said you were going to do all these things. He goes, hey, this is my money we're talking about. This is real. So the idea of empathy and actually being in the other person's shoes, and when it hits reality, it's very challenging. You can also think about being able to write more challenging memos outside of just explaining what happened in net present value IRR. Write a memo to employees to disclose the calculations, and you have to do the calculations. Don't miss that part. But how to close a plant, or how to lay off workers, or how to fire workers, things like this. We can certainly do that in our classes. In some measure, in almost every class, we can include power and empathy and humility and leadership. All of these other softer skills we can put in using a matrix approach.